Okay, so get this. A serial killer was on the dating game. Can you believe that?
It's crazy, right?
Like, you couldn't make this stuff up, but it's the true story behind this film, Woman of the Hour, and it doesn't sound like your typical true crime thing, you know?
Yeah, it's not.
It's directed by Anna Kendrick, and she stars in it too, and from what I've read, she's really kind of turning the whole true crime genre on its head with how this one is told.
Yeah, you're right on with that. It seems like she really wanted to focus more on the victims instead of the killer, which is Rodney Alcala.
And the reviews are really praising her for that, especially since this is her first time directing.
Oh, yeah.
They're all saying she creates this tension not through like jump scares or anything, but more by like tapping into those everyday anxieties that women especially can relate to.
Right, right.
I read about this opening scene that
Oh.
people were really captivated by.
Okay. Yeah.
Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so the opening scene you're probably talking about is where there's a woman who senses danger, and instead of like running, she freezes.
Wow.
And it's this split-second decision. And the critics are saying that it makes you really think about like the kinds of calculations that women are making in those kinds of situations. Like,
Right.
do you trust your gut?
Uh-huh.
Do you make a scene? A really powerful way to start the film.
Yeah, it really makes you think, like, what would you do?
Right.
Would you trust your instinct?
Yeah.
And then there's that restaurant scene that everybody's talking about with Cheryl, which is Kendrick's character. And she feels like something's off with her date, but she doesn't want to overreact
Yeah.
or, make a scene. And it just shows that difficult situation that women are in.
Yeah. I mean, and that scene is such a good example of like Kendrick using subtlety
Mm-hmm.
to really drive home a point.
Right.
And reviewers are saying that even like how she uses silence in that scene, it creates this tension where you're just, you're holding your breath with her. Like, what's going to happen next?
Oh, wow. Silence can be so powerful in film.
It can.
But okay, let's talk about the man himself, Rodney Alcala.
Okay.
Reviews are calling Daniel Zavato's performance chilling. And even like people are saying that they wanted to like scrub their eyes after seeing it. Like,
Oh, wow.
that's intense. So what makes his performance so disturbing?
Well, it's interesting because it's not like he's portraying him as like super menacing the whole time,
Right.
but he has these moments of like quiet intensity, and it's like he's sizing up his victims. And one reviewer even called it like the silence of a predator.
Oh.
And that just gets under your skin, and it's almost like you're complicit in his gaze as a viewer.
That's really interesting. And it's like not even what he's saying, but what he's not saying.
Right.
That makes it so creepy. But the film isn't just about like him being creepy, is it? It touches upon like bigger societal issues with the justice system too.
Yeah, there is some social commentary there, and the critics are saying that Alcala had these allegations against him before he was caught, but they were mostly ignored.
It's unbelievable that he was even on the dating game with all this stuff in his past. So do you think the film really explores those failures of the justice system?
Well, that's where some of the reviewers had critiques.
Yeah.
Some were saying they appreciated the message, but it could have gone a little bit deeper into these systemic issues.
Okay.
Like, for example, there's a detail in real life where a runaway's testimony was really crucial to getting that final conviction for Alcala.
Oh, wow.
Imagine if they showed that, like how one person speaking up could have that impact even when the system fails them.
That's a really great point. It seems like there's a lot to unpack here about those societal issues that this film is looking at.
There is.
But before we go deeper into that, let's talk about the visuals in the film. Because the reviews were mentioning the 70s aesthetic, and they praise the cinematography a lot.
Yeah, Kendrick really nailed that 70s feel.
Uh-huh.
Bell bottoms and shag carpets, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
But it's more than just the set design.
Mm-hmm.
The cinematography itself is kind of unsettling, with all the shadows and close-ups. It's almost like you're trapped in that world with the characters as a viewer.
It really makes you think about like how those aesthetic choices affect how you feel.
Yes.
Like, are you drawn in or are you feeling uncomfortable? It's like another layer of the story.
Absolutely.
Speaking of storytelling, one thing that struck me in the reviews was how this film is being talked about within the true crime genre.
Uh-huh.
How is this film different from like a typical serial killer documentary or thriller?
Yeah, it really is different. It feels like Kendrick is giving a voice to an experience that a lot of women have, but that we don't talk about a lot.
Yeah, and how many times have you felt that yourself, that like something's not right?
Right.
And then you're told like, oh, you're overreacting or you're being dramatic.
Exactly. And the film doesn't shy away from talking about how like male narcissism plays into all of this too.
Yeah.
It's not just about Alcala as this monster, but it's about how those narcissistic tendencies can be really dangerous, especially for women.
Right. It's not just like outward aggression either. It's like the manipulation and making people feel like they can't speak up.
Exactly.
And that goes back to those criticisms of the film, like not fully exploring the justice system's failures.
Yeah, think about it. Alcala was on the dating game.
I know.
Like, he charmed his way onto that show, even with all those allegations against him.
Right?
So how much of that was him being manipulative, and how much was the system failing to listen to those women?
It's like those two things are totally connected.
Yeah.
Like, male narcissism can thrive when you have a system that doesn't listen to women.
Right.
And this story's from the 70s, but it feels so relevant to what's happening today.
Yeah.
We're still having these conversations about believing women and consent.
It's definitely a film for our times.
And about, like, recognizing those red flags even when they're subtle.
Absolutely.
And I think Kendrick donating the profits to charities for victims of violence and sexual assault is a really powerful statement.
It really is. It shows that she's committed to these issues, not just talking about them.
So we've got this film with great direction, chilling performances. Yeah.
And it really makes you think about society.
Mm-hmm.
But for the average viewer, why should they watch this film?
Well, what makes this film different is that it focuses on the emotional and psychological effects of this kind of violence.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about, like, who did it or, like, the gory details, but it's about how fear and uncertainty can be a part of everyday life.
Right.
And it makes you consider the victim's perspective, you know, and how society fails to protect them.
It's not just entertainment then. It's like a call to action.
It is.
To change things.
It is. And it reminds us that we all have to listen and believe women and advocate for change.
And I think it's really interesting how the film connects that message to the dangers of male narcissism.
Yes, definitely.
Like how unchecked ego can create this space for violence.
It's a conversation we need to be having, and this film gets people talking about it.
Right. And it's not afraid to look at like the bad sides of masculinity and how some of the things we see as normal can actually lead to really harmful behavior.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me that this film can deal with these serious topics.
Yeah.
Right. But still be a gripping thriller that you want to watch.
Well, that's what makes Kendrick such a good director, I think.
Yeah.
She uses this true crime story, but then she's also making you think about these bigger issues. It reminds us that art can be a powerful tool for making change.
Yeah.
And that films like this can get people talking and hopefully taking action.
So with that, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought.
Okay.
Considering how this film shows how women deal with danger, how do you think things have changed since the 70s?
Yeah.
Have we made any progress, or are we still facing the same problems?
It's something to think about.
Share your thoughts with us on social media using the hashtag #TheDeepDive.
Yes.
We want to hear from you. We've covered a lot about Woman of the Hour so far. The portrayal of Rodney Alcala, Daniel Zavasso's performance, focusing on the victims and those societal issues that it brings up. But before we finish up our deep dive today, I want to make sure we really highlight the importance of listening to women and believing them.
Yeah, that's a huge theme throughout the film.
Yeah. From Cheryl just dealing with her everyday anxieties to the justice system failing and letting Alcala continue to harm people.
It's like the film is showing us how we respond to women's fears, and it's not pretty.
Right. And it's not just like pointing that out. It's like it wants us to do something about it.
Yeah, like we all have a responsibility to listen and believe and make a change.
Absolutely.
And it was interesting how the film connected that message to the dangers of male narcissism.
Yes, definitely.
Like when men's egos are left unchecked, it can lead to some really bad stuff.
It really can. The conversation we need to have. And this film helps us do that.
And it's not afraid to show the negative side of masculinity, you know, and how certain things we think of as normal can actually lead to really harmful behavior.
Exactly.
It's amazing to me how Woman of the Hour can tackle these serious issues while also being a thriller that you can't stop watching.
Yeah. Kendrick does such a good job as a director. She takes this true crime story, and then she's also making you think about these bigger issues.
And it's like a reminder that art can make a difference.
That movies like this can start conversations and maybe even get people to do something.
Exactly.
So with that, I want to leave you, our listener, with one final thought. With this film's focus on how women deal with dangerous situations, do you think society's perceptions and responses to this have evolved since the 70s? Have we made progress, or are we still dealing with the same problems?
That's a great question to think about.
Yeah, it really is. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Woman of the Hour.
Thanks for listening.